Yesterday, my daughter Doris stood in front of 25 neighbors at our backyard barbecue and announced, "Daddy needs professional care. We found a wonderful place for him. Daddy has 30 days to get ready." I sold everything I owned to buy this $1.5 million house. I put Doris's name on the deed to avoid inheritance taxes. I thought this would be our 3-generation home. Everyone just stared at me with pity in their eyes. Nobody dared interfere with family business. I stood there holding my plate of food, feeling like a stranger in the house I had bought. But Doris forgot one important detail about this house. On day 29, I made my first phone call. "Hi, I'm Henry Sullivan, and I'm 64 years old. But before I tell you what happened next, let me know where you're listening from and what time it is there. Don't forget to subscribe for more stories like this. For 28 years, I was married to Brianna. We raised Doris from when she was 7 years old. Life was simple in our old house on Elm Street. Brianna would make Sunday dinners. Doris would bring home report cards. We'd watch movies on Friday nights. Brianna always said family was everything. That was our foundation. That was our truth. 3 years ago, Brianna died in a car accident. No warning, no goodbye. Just a phone call from the hospital. I held her hand as she took her last breath. The last thing she whispered was, "Keep the family close, Henry. Promise me." I promised. I meant it. After the funeral, I felt so empty. The house felt too big, too quiet. Doris and Kevin were renting a small apartment across town. They had 2 kids and barely enough space. Doris would visit and complain about not being able to afford a real home. But what I promised Brianna on that hospital bed would change everything. I made a decision that would haunt me forever. I decided to sell our family home for $680,000. Combined with my savings, I could buy something bigger, something where we could all live together. I found the perfect house on Maple Ridge Drive, $1.5 million, 4 bedrooms, 3 bathrooms, a big backyard for the grandchildren. I imagined Sunday dinners again, birthday parties, Christmas mornings. The dream of a 3-generation home felt so real. But there was one detail in the purchase contract that I kept from Doris, something my lawyer suggested, something I thought I'd never need, a lifetime residency clause. It meant that even though Doris's name would be on the deed, I retained the right to live there for the rest of my life. I thought it was just paperwork, just a precaution. I had no idea this clause would become my salvation. Moving day was magical. The kids ran through the empty rooms, their laughter echoing off the walls. Doris hugged me tight and said, "Daddy, this is incredible. Thank you for making this possible." I felt Brianna's presence that day. I felt like I'd kept my promise. I set up my bedroom on the first floor. Doris and Kevin took the master suite upstairs. The kids got their own rooms. For the first few months, it worked perfectly. We had family dinners every Sunday. The grandchildren would run downstairs in the morning to hug me. Kevin and I would watch football together. Doris seemed genuinely happy. But slowly, things began to change. Doris started making comments about the house being too much work. She'd roll her eyes when I offered to help with anything. Little by little, I started feeling like I was in the way. I didn't realize Doris had already begun seeing me as a burden. The first few months felt like the dream I'd imagined. Sunday dinners around the big dining table, grandchildren's art projects on the refrigerator, Kevin and I working in the garden together. Doris would smile and say, "This is what family looks like." But then the subtle changes started. Doris began referring to it as our house instead of Daddy's house. She'd make decisions about renovations without asking me. When friends visited, she'd introduce me as Kevin's father-in-law who lives with us, not as the man who bought the house. The grandchildren started calling me Papa Henry instead of just Papa, like I was some distant relative. Doris would shush them when they got too loud near my room. She'd apologize to guests for the inconvenience when I joined conversations. I started eating dinner in my room more often. The change was so gradual, I almost didn't notice it happening. But something inside me started to break. Let me tell you about the biggest mistake of my life. When we bought the house, Doris asked me to put her name on the deed. "For tax purposes, Daddy," she said. "It'll save us thousands in inheritance taxes later." It made sense. I trusted her completely. At the lawyer's office, I signed document after document, transfer of ownership, of property tax arrangements. Doris's name went on everything. I kept my lawyer's advice about the lifetime residency clause to myself. I thought Doris would never need to know about it. That decision haunts me every single day. Because what I didn't know was that Doris had already started viewing me as a temporary inconvenience. She wasn't thinking about our 3-generation home. She was thinking about her house, her investment, her future, and I had just handed her all the legal power she needed to make me disappear. But I had kept copies of everything, including that lifetime residency clause. I thought being generous would bring us closer. I paid for the kids' private school tuition, $25,000 a year. I bought Doris a new car when hers broke down, $45,000. I covered the cost of new furniture, kitchen renovations, landscaping. I wanted to contribute. I wanted to feel useful. Every time I wrote a check, Doris would hug me and say, "You're the best daddy in the world." But I started noticing something strange. Doris kept a notebook where she wrote down every expense, every dollar I contributed. She'd ask for receipts when I paid for groceries. She'd calculate how much I owed for utilities. It felt like she was building a case, like she was keeping score. What I didn't know was that Doris was documenting everything I gave her. She was preparing for something that would justify what came next. The pattern was already in motion. 8 months after we moved in, Doris approached me with a business opportunity. She and Kevin wanted to open a restaurant. They needed a loan, $400,000. "It's a sure thing, Daddy," she said. "We'll pay you back with interest, better than any bank could offer." I wanted to support their dreams. I wanted to help my family succeed, so I signed the paperwork. I transferred the money from my retirement account. The restaurant failed within 8 months. Poor location, bad management, too much competition. Doris never talked about paying me back. When I brought it up once, she said, "Daddy, we're family. Money shouldn't matter between us." But $400,000 was most of my remaining savings, and Doris acted like it had never happened. I started realizing that Doris viewed my money as her inheritance, money she was already entitled to. But Doris never mentioned paying back that debt. 2 months later, Doris asked me to sign more paperwork. "Just updating our property records, Daddy," she explained, "making sure everything's current for tax purposes." I trusted her. I signed without reading carefully. My family lawyer had warned me to be cautious about signing anything, but this was my daughter. Why would she hurt me? Later that night, I made copies of everything I'd signed. I've always been careful with important documents. When I read through the papers carefully, my blood ran cold. Doris had somehow arranged for a home equity loan. $400,000, using the house as collateral. My signature was on the documents, but I had never agreed to that loan. She had forged my signature. My own daughter had committed fraud. The loan amount was exactly the same as the money I'd lent her for the restaurant. What I discovered in those papers kept me awake for days. The next few months were torture. Doris started implementing new rules in the house. No cooking after 8 p.m., no television in the living room during family time, no friends visiting without permission. I felt like a tenant in my own home. The grandchildren were suddenly too busy to spend time with me. When I asked Doris about it, she said, "They have their own lives, Daddy. You can't expect them to entertain you." I started feeling like a stranger in the house I had bought. Every conversation felt forced. Every meal felt awkward. I'd catch Doris and Kevin whispering, then stopping when I entered the room. I'd see them looking at brochures for senior living communities. They thought I didn't notice. But I noticed everything. I started paying attention to every conversation, every phone call, every document left on the kitchen counter. I was building my own case now. One evening I overheard Doris on the phone with someone. She was in the kitchen thinking I was asleep. "He's getting more difficult every day," she said. "We can't keep doing this forever. The house is too much for him. He needs professional care." I pressed my ear against my bedroom door. "I've been researching places," she continued. "There are some really nice assisted living facilities. He'd be happier there." I felt sick to my stomach. This was my daughter talking about me like I was a problem to solve, like I was some burden they needed to dispose of. I grabbed my phone and started recording. Every conversation, every phone call I could hear. I needed evidence. I needed proof of what they were planning. What I heard in those recordings would change everything. But the worst was still coming. The next morning, I found a piece of mail that changed everything. A statement from the bank about our home equity loan. $400,000 had been borrowed against the house. Doris had used my forged signature to secure the loan. The monthly payments were $800. Money that was coming out of the house's equity. My equity. Everything became clear. Doris hadn't failed to pay back the restaurant loan. She had simply transferred the debt to the house. She had made me responsible for her business failure without telling me. My own daughter had committed fraud. She had stolen from me using legal documents and forged signatures. I sat in my bedroom, holding that bank statement, feeling my world collapse. My hands were shaking, my chest felt tight. This wasn't just about money anymore. This was about betrayal. This was about my daughter treating me like a mark in some elaborate con game. The rage I felt was unlike anything I'd ever experienced. But I didn't confront her. Not yet. I started gathering evidence instead. My birthday came and went without acknowledgement. 64 years old, and my own family forgot. No card, no cake, no phone call from the grandchildren. When I mentioned it at dinner, Doris said, "Oh, Daddy, we've been so busy. We'll celebrate next weekend." Next weekend never came. Brianna's birthday arrived a month later. I always visited her grave on that day. When I asked Doris to come with me, she said, "I have yoga class. Maybe next time." There was no next time. I went alone, like I'd been doing everything else. I started eating dinner in my room most nights. It was easier than sitting at the table, feeling invisible. The grandchildren barely acknowledged me anymore. When they did speak to me, it felt forced, polite, like they'd been coached. But what I heard during that late-night phone call truly destroyed me. Doris was talking to Kevin in the kitchen. They thought I was asleep. The conversation I recorded that night changed everything between us forever. "Dad will never figure it out," Doris whispered into the phone. I pressed the record button on my phone and held it closer to the door. "We sell the house, pay off the loan, and still have over $1 million left. We tell him it's for his own good, that he needs professional care." Kevin's voice was muffled, but I could hear him agreeing. "The nursing home we visited was nice," he said. "He'd probably be happier there anyway, around people his own age." "He's becoming too dependent," Doris continued, "always asking what we're doing, always wanting to be included. It's exhausting. And honestly, the house is too much for someone his age. He could fall. He could hurt himself. We'd be liable." They were planning my entire future without me, deciding where I'd live, what I'd do, how I'd spend my final years, like I was a child who couldn't make decisions for myself. But they didn't know I was listening. They didn't know I was recording every word. The next conversation I recorded was even worse. Doris was talking to someone about guardianship, legal guardianship. "If we can prove he's not mentally competent," she said, "we can make all his financial decisions for him. It would protect him from making bad choices." Bad choices. Like buying a house for my ungrateful daughter. They had consulted with a lawyer about having me declared mentally incompetent. They wanted legal control over my money, my property, my life. They were planning to steal everything from me using the legal system, and they thought I was too old and stupid to stop them. I realized that the restaurant loan wasn't an accident. The forged signature wasn't a mistake. This was all part of a larger plan. They had been setting me up from the beginning, taking my money, building a case for incompetence, preparing to have me removed from my own home. I knew I had to act fast, but I also knew I had to be smart about it. I made an appointment with my own lawyer, not the family lawyer who had handled the house purchase. Someone new, someone Doris didn't know about. I brought all the documents, all the recordings, all the evidence I'd been collecting. "Mr. Sullivan," he said after reviewing everything, "you have several options here. But first, let me explain something about your property deed." He pulled out the original purchase agreement. "This lifetime residency clause means you have the right to live in that house for the rest of your life, regardless of whose name is on the deed. But more importantly, it gives you the right to sell the property if the current deed holder violates the terms of residency." I didn't understand. What terms? "Peaceful enjoyment of the property, financial responsibility, respect for your rights as a resident." He looked at me seriously. "Based on what you've told me, your daughter has violated every single one of these terms." That's when I realized Doris had dug her own grave. She thought she owned the house. But legally, I still had all the power. Over the next week, I quietly prepared for what was coming. I contacted a real estate agent I'd used before, someone trustworthy, someone discreet. I explained my situation without going into too much detail. "I need to sell this house quickly," I told her. "Within 30 days, cash buyers only." She understood. Properties in our neighborhood moved fast when priced right. With the right buyer, we could close in 2 weeks, she said. Maybe sooner with a cash offer. I started looking for a new place to live. A small apartment. Something simple. Somewhere I could have peace. I packed a single suitcase with my most important belongings. Photos of Brianna, important documents, a few clothes. I made arrangements with my bank, set up new accounts, transferred money to secure my future. Everything had to be perfect, legal, unbreakable. But before I could execute my plan, Doris decided to make her move public. She organized the barbecue that would become the worst day of my life, and the best day of my revenge. The barbecue was Doris's idea. "Let's have the neighbors over," she said. "It'll be fun." 25 people showed up, friends from down the street, the couple next door, people I'd known for 3 years, people who thought of me as part of the community. I spent the afternoon grilling burgers and hot dogs, making conversation, laughing at jokes. Everything felt normal, happy even. The grandchildren were playing in the backyard. Doris was serving drinks and snacks. Kevin was talking about work with the other men. For a moment, I forgot about the tension. I forgot about the recordings and the lawyers and the plans. This felt like the family gathering I'd always wanted. The 3-generation home working exactly as I'd imagined. But I noticed Doris seemed nervous. She kept checking her watch. Kevin kept whispering in her ear. They were planning something that required an audience. I had no idea this would be the last time I'd laugh in that house. I had no idea that in 30 minutes my life would change forever. Doris stood up in the middle of the party and clapped her hands. "Everyone, can I have your attention?" The conversation stopped. 25 pairs of eyes turned toward her. She was standing next to the patio table, holding a glass of wine. She looked confident, prepared. "I wanted to share something with all of you," she began. "As you know, my father has been living with us for 3 years now." Nods around the circle. Smiles. People thought this was some kind of appreciation speech. "Daddy is 64 years old, and Kevin and I have been talking about his future." My stomach dropped. I knew what was coming. "We've decided that he needs more specialized care than we can provide. Professional care. We've found a wonderful assisted living facility." The smiles faded. People shifted uncomfortably. Mrs. Patterson from next door looked confused. "Daddy has 30 days to get ready for the transition." Doris looked directly at me. "We think he'll be much happier there, around people his own age, with professional staff who can take proper care of him." My heart was pounding. My face felt hot. I was holding a plate of food frozen in place. The silence was deafening. 25 people stared at me with pity in their eyes. Some looked away, embarrassed. Others whispered to their spouses. Nobody said anything. Nobody asked questions. Nobody defended me. This was family business. Private matters that neighbors shouldn't interfere with. Even though it was happening in public, in front of everyone, it was still somehow off limits for comment. Doris pulled out a glossy brochure from her purse. "Golden Valley Manor is really beautiful," she said, showing pictures to the people nearby. "They have activities, organized meals, medical staff on site. It's exactly what Daddy needs." I stood there like a statue, holding my plate of food, feeling every eye on me, feeling completely powerless, completely humiliated. My own daughter had just announced my exile in front of our entire community, but that's when I made my decision. Silence would be my most powerful weapon. I would not argue. I would not defend myself. I would not give them the confrontation they expected. Instead, I would let them think they had won. "I understand," I said quietly. Those were the only words I spoke. I set down my plate and walked into the house. Behind me, I could hear awkward conversations resuming, people trying to pretend nothing uncomfortable had happened. I went to my bedroom and closed the door. Outside, the party continued. I could hear laughter, music, the sound of people enjoying themselves while my life fell apart. The grandchildren were still playing. Kevin was still grilling. Everything was normal for everyone except me. I sat on my bed and felt something I'd never felt before. Complete betrayal. Not just from Doris, but from every person at that party who said nothing, who let it happen, who treated me like a problem to be solved instead of a human being with feelings. But they had just awakened something inside me, something they didn't know existed. For 64 years, I'd been the nice guy, the generous father, the man who avoided conflict. That version of me died in the backyard that afternoon. That night, I couldn't sleep. I sat at my desk and reviewed every document I'd ever signed, every contract, every agreement, every piece of paper related to the house. I found the original purchase agreement with the lifetime residency clause highlighted in yellow. Section 12B. The seller retains the right of occupancy for the duration of his natural life, with full enjoyment of the property, provided that such occupancy does not interfere with the property's use by the primary deed holder. But there was more. Section 12C. In the event that the primary deed holder violates the terms of peaceful cohabitation, financial responsibility, or respect for the seller's residency rights, the seller may reclaim full ownership and dispose of the property as he sees fit. Doris had violated every single term. She had made my life miserable. She had committed financial fraud. She had planned to have me declared incompetent. She had given me the legal right to take back everything. I spent the night developing my strategy. I had 29 days to plan the perfect counterattack. 29 days to gather my resources and execute a plan that would be completely legal, completely justified, and completely devastating. First, I called my real estate agent. I need to sell the house on Maple Ridge Drive, I told her. Fast sale, cash buyers only. Can we do it in less than 30 days? With the right buyer and the right price, we could close in 2 weeks, she said. Are you sure about this, Mr. Sullivan? I've never been more sure of anything in my life. Next, I called my lawyer. I want to activate the lifetime residency clause, I told him. How quickly can we process a sale? If we have a buyer ready, we can close in 72 hours, he said. 29 days. That's all the time they had left. I looked through old photo albums that night. Pictures of Brianna and me when we were young. Doris's graduation from high school. Family vacations. Christmas mornings. Birthday parties. Moments when we were happy. When we were really a family. I found a letter Brianna had written me for our 20th anniversary. Henry, it said, you have the biggest heart of anyone I know. You give everything to the people you love. Just remember that love should be returned with respect. Never let anyone take advantage of your kindness. I held that letter and cried for the first time since Brianna's funeral. Not just for my marriage, but for the family I thought I had, for the daughter I thought I knew, for the man I used to be. Brianna, I whispered to her photo, I'm sorry I couldn't keep the family together, but I can't let them destroy me either. Sometimes you have to let go to protect yourself. The next morning I started packing my most important belongings. 1 suitcase, just the essentials. I opened a new bank account at a different branch. I arranged for a short-term apartment rental. Everything had to be ready. My real estate agent called with good news. I have a cash buyer, she said. A developer who wants to renovate and flip. He's offering $1.52 million, full cash. Can close in 24 hours if you're ready. I'm ready, I told her. My lawyer reviewed all the paperwork one final time. Everything looks perfect, Mr. Sullivan. The sale is completely legal. The lifetime residency clause gives you full authority. They can't stop this. I signed the papers that afternoon. By tomorrow, the house would belong to someone else. Doris and Kevin would have 24 hours to find somewhere else to live. 29 days. That's what Doris gave me. Now she would get 24 hours. Day 29 arrived. I woke up early and made coffee like it was any other morning. Doris and Kevin left for work at their usual time. The kids went to school. I had the house to myself for the next 8 hours. My real estate agent arrived at 9 a.m. with the buyer, a middle-aged man in an expensive suit who barely looked around. This'll do, he said after a 10-minute walkthrough. I can close today if the paperwork's ready. It's ready, I told him. We met at the lawyer's office at noon. I signed document after document. Transfer of ownership, deed of sale, financial agreements. Everything was notarized. Everything was legal. Everything was final. The house now belongs to Mr. Davidson, my lawyer announced. He'll take possession tomorrow morning at 8 a.m. I felt a strange mix of emotions. Relief, sadness, anticipation, freedom. For the first time in 3 years, I was making decisions about my own life. Nobody was consulting me. Nobody was managing me. Nobody was planning my future without my permission. When Doris came home that evening, She had no idea she was about to become homeless. Doris walked into the kitchen around 6 p.m., looking tired from work. "Did you start packing yet, Daddy?" she asked casually. "We should probably label your boxes so the movers know what goes where." "I've taken care of everything," I told her. It wasn't a lie. Kevin came home an hour later. Dinner was awkward, like it had been for months. The kids talked about school. Doris complained about her boss. Kevin discussed a project at work. Normal family conversation. The last normal conversation we'd ever have. After dinner, I went to my room and placed an envelope on the kitchen counter. Inside was a copy of the sale contract, copies of all the fraud evidence I'd collected, and a simple note. "The house has been sold. You have 24 hours to vacate. All your belongings must be removed by 8 a.m. tomorrow. The new owner will take possession at that time." I left that envelope where Doris would find it in the morning. Then I took my suitcase and quietly left through the front door. I drove to my new apartment and didn't look back. I checked into a hotel that night. I wanted to be somewhere neutral when the phone calls started, somewhere I could think clearly. I ordered room service and sat by the window looking out at the city lights. Around 11 p.m., my phone started ringing. Doris's number. I didn't answer. It rang again and again. Then Kevin's number. Then Doris again. I turned off my phone and went to bed. I slept better that night than I had in 3 years. The next morning, I turned my phone back on. 37 missed calls, 22 voicemails, 43 text messages, all from Doris and Kevin, all increasingly frantic. The first voicemail was confused. "Daddy, what is this envelope? Call me back." The fifth voicemail was angry. "This is insane. You can't sell the house. My name is on the deed." The 15th voicemail was desperate. "Please, Daddy, we can work this out. Don't do this to your grandchildren." The last voicemail was just crying. I deleted all of them without listening to the end. I had a meeting with my lawyer at 9 a.m. Final paperwork to sign. Final loose ends to tie up. My lawyer's office was calm and professional. Everything was exactly opposite of the chaos I knew was happening at the house. "The sale is final," he confirmed. "Mr. Davidson now owns the property. He's scheduled to take possession at 8 a.m. "What about Doris?" I asked. "She has no legal recourse," he said. "The lifetime residency clause was clearly written. She violated the terms. You had every right to exercise your ownership options." At 8:15 a.m., my phone rang. It was Doris. This time, I answered. "Daddy, please," she sobbed. "The new owner is here. He has movers. They're taking our furniture out of the house. Please stop this, please." "You gave me 30 days," I said calmly. "I'm giving you 24 hours. "This is our home," she screamed. "The kids' home. Where are we supposed to go?" "You should have thought about that before you planned to put me in a nursing home," I replied. "We can work this out," Kevin's voice came on the line. "We'll cancel the nursing home. You can come back. We'll start over." "No," I said. "We won't." I hung up the phone and turned it off again. According to my real estate agent, Doris and Kevin spent the day frantically calling lawyers, trying to find some way to stop the sale, some way to claim ownership, some way to prove I was mentally incompetent or being manipulated. But every lawyer told them the same thing. The sale was legal. The lifetime residency clause was enforceable. I had acted within my rights. There was nothing they could do. The new owner, Mr. Davidson, was understanding but firm. He gave them until 6 p.m. to remove all their belongings. After that, anything left in the house would be considered abandoned property. Doris called me one more time that afternoon. "Daddy," she said, her voice broken. "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. We made mistakes. We didn't mean to hurt you. Please give us another chance." "You taught me something valuable, Doris," I told her. "You taught me that I need to have boundaries, that I need to respect myself even when my own family doesn't." "Where are we supposed to go?" she asked. "You're a smart woman," I said. "You'll figure it out, the same way you figured out how to forge my signature and steal $400,000 from me." "We'll pay you back," she promised. "No," I said. "You won't, because I'm done being your bank account." I drove by the house one last time that evening. The moving trucks were gone. The driveway was empty. Mr. Davidson had left a sold sign by the mailbox. The house looked the same from the outside, but everything inside had changed. I used my key to go inside one final time. The rooms were empty except for a few pieces of furniture that Doris couldn't fit in whatever vehicle they'd rented. The kitchen counter still had coffee stains. The living room carpet had marks where the sofa used to sit. I walked through each room, remembering the dreams I'd had for this place. The family dinners, the holiday celebrations, the grandchildren's laughter. All of it felt like someone else's memories now. In my old bedroom, I found a framed photo that Doris had left behind. It was from Christmas 3 years ago. All of us around the tree, Doris hugging me, the kids on my lap, everyone smiling, everyone happy. I looked at that photo and felt sad for the family we could have been, the relationships we could have had, the love we could have shared. But I didn't feel guilty. Not anymore. "Goodbye," I said to the empty house. Then I locked the door and left the key with Mr. Davidson. I moved into my new apartment the next day, a small one-bedroom place downtown. Clean, simple, peaceful. For the first time in 30 years, I was only responsible for myself. Only myself to please. Only my own decisions to make. Doris continued calling for the first week. Then the calls stopped. I heard through mutual friends that they'd found a small rental apartment across town. The kids had to change schools. Kevin's credit was damaged because of the home equity loan default. Doris had to take a second job to pay rent. I felt sorry for the grandchildren. None of this was their fault. But I couldn't save them without destroying myself. Sometimes adults have to face the consequences of their choices, even when children are involved. I started taking cooking classes. I joined a book club at the library. I volunteered at a local charity. For the first time since Brianna died, I was building a life instead of just surviving one. The freedom felt strange at first. Then it felt wonderful. 3 weeks later, I ran into Mrs. Patterson at the grocery store. She lived next door to my old house. "Henry," she said uncomfortably, "I heard what happened. I'm so sorry." "Don't be sorry," I told her. "I'm doing well." "But Doris said—" She started, then stopped herself. "What did Doris say?" "She said you'd had some kind of breakdown." "That you weren't thinking clearly." "That you'd made a terrible mistake." Mrs. Patterson looked embarrassed. "But you seem fine to me." "I am fine," I said. "I made the first clear decision I'd made in years." "She also said you'd forgiven them, that you were planning to help them buy another house." I laughed. Not a bitter laugh, a genuine laugh. "Mrs. Patterson, I haven't spoken to Doris since the day I sold the house, and I don't plan to." "Oh," she said, looking confused. "She made it sound like you were all working things out." "Doris has always been good at telling people what they want to hear," I said, "but actions matter more than words." A month after the sale, I visited Brianna's grave. I brought fresh flowers and a folding chair. I wanted to sit with her for a while, to explain what had happened, to ask for her forgiveness for not keeping the family together. "Brianna," I said to her headstone, "I tried to keep my promise. I really tried. But they didn't want a family. They wanted a retirement account." The cemetery was quiet except for the wind through the trees. I could almost hear Brianna's voice responding. Not approving or disapproving, just understanding. "I learned something important," I continued. "Love isn't just about giving. It's about mutual respect, about boundaries, about treating each other like human beings instead of resources to be managed." I thought about the man I used to be, the people pleaser, the pushover, the father who confused generosity with love. That man had died in the backyard at the barbecue. This new man was still learning how to live. "I think you'd be proud of me," I told Brianna. "I finally learned how to protect myself." 2 months later, I heard from a mutual friend that Doris and Kevin were struggling. The rental apartment was expensive. Kevin's business was suffering because of the financial stress. Doris had applied for assistance with the kids' school costs. Part of me wanted to help. The father in me wanted to write a check and solve their problems, but I knew that helping them would just restart the cycle. They would take my money, make promises they wouldn't keep, and eventually find new ways to take advantage of my generosity. I also heard that they'd been telling people I was suffering from dementia, that I'd made the sale during a mental health crisis, that they were looking into having it reversed. It was the same strategy they'd planned from the beginning: declare me incompetent and take control of my assets. But I had medical records, recent evaluations, clear evidence of my mental competence. Their lies couldn't hurt me anymore. The man who had bought their manipulation and sob stories was gone. The man who believed their promises and excuses had learned better. What would you do if you discovered your own child was planning to have you declared incompetent? Let me know in the comments. 6 months after the sale, the consequences of Doris's financial fraud caught up with her. The bank investigated the forged signatures on the home equity loan. They found discrepancies in the documentation. They discovered that I had never authorized the loan. Kevin's business partner found out about the fraudulent loan during a routine financial review. He immediately dissolved their partnership and demanded repayment of his investment. Without Kevin's business income, Doris and Kevin couldn't make rent on their apartment. I heard they'd moved in with Kevin's parents temporarily. The grandchildren were sleeping on air mattresses in a basement. Doris had taken a job at a call center. Kevin was driving for a ride-share company. The financial dominoes kept falling. Their credit scores plummeted. They couldn't qualify for a mortgage. They couldn't even qualify for a decent rental property. The $400,000 debt they'd hidden from me had become a millstone around their necks. Part of me felt bad for them, but a larger part of me felt satisfied. They had learned that actions have consequences, that fraud has penalties, that treating people badly eventually catches up with you. I hadn't caused their suffering. I had simply stopped enabling their behavior. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do is let people face the results of their choices. The social consequences were almost as severe as the financial ones. People in the neighborhood learned the truth about what had happened. They discovered that Doris and Kevin had planned to put me in a nursing home to steal my house. They learned about the forged signatures and the hidden debt. Mrs. Patterson called me to apologize. "Henry, I had no idea," she said. "Doris made it sound like you were having mental problems, like they were trying to help you." They were very convincing, I told her. They had years of practice. The couple who had hosted the barbecue sent me a card. "We should have spoken up," they wrote. "We should have asked questions. We're sorry we let them humiliate you without saying anything." I appreciated the apology, but I understood why they'd stayed silent. Family drama makes people uncomfortable. Nobody wants to get involved in other people's problems. But their silence had enabled Doris's public humiliation of me. The grandchildren were the ones I felt worst for. They had to change schools, make new friends, deal with whispers about their parents' financial problems. None of this was their fault, but they were paying the price anyway. But I couldn't save them without sacrificing myself. A year later, I received a letter in the mail, Doris's handwriting on the envelope. My first instinct was to throw it away without opening it, but curiosity got the better of me. "Dear Daddy," it began, "I know you probably don't want to hear from me. I know I hurt you in ways I can't undo, but I wanted you to know that I understand now. I understand what I did wrong. I understand why you had to protect yourself." The letter went on for 3 pages, apologizing, explaining, promising to do better, asking for a chance to rebuild our relationship. She said she'd learned from her mistakes, that she'd grown as a person, that she wanted to be the daughter I deserved. It was well written, emotional, convincing. The old me would have been moved by it. The old me would have called her immediately and offered to help. But I'd heard these promises before, after the restaurant failed, after I discovered the forged signatures, after every crisis. Doris was very good at apologizing when she needed something, very good at promising to change when the consequences became uncomfortable. Kevin called the next day. "Did you get Doris's letter?" he asked. "She really means it this time, Henry. She's changed." "We've been in counseling," Kevin continued. "Individual therapy and couples therapy. We've learned about boundaries and respect and healthy family relationships. We want to make things right." "That's good," I said. "I hope therapy helps you." "Don't you want to see us?" he asked. "Don't you miss the kids?" "Of course I miss them," I said. "But missing someone doesn't mean you should let them hurt you again." "We're not the same people we were," Kevin insisted. "We've learned from our mistakes. We'd never do anything like that again." "Kevin," I said gently, "you said the same thing after the restaurant failed. Doris said the same thing after I caught her forging my signature. You're always different people after you get caught." "Until the next time." "There won't be a next time," he promised. "You're right," I agreed. "There won't be, because I won't give you the opportunity." I hung up the phone and felt sad for a moment. Sad for the family we could have been. The relationships we could have had. But I also felt proud of myself for maintaining my boundaries, for not falling back into old patterns. Have you ever had to choose between family loyalty and self-respect?
Share your story below. 2 years have passed since I sold the house. I live quietly in my apartment downtown. I take art classes on Tuesday mornings. I play chess at the community center on Thursday evenings. I volunteer at a literacy program on weekends. I have friends now. Real friends who value me for who I am, not what I can give them. Sometimes I see Doris at the grocery store or the bank. We nod politely but don't speak. She looks older, tired. The weight of consequences has aged her. But she's survived. She's learned to live without my financial support. Maybe that's the most valuable lesson I ever taught her. I keep Brianna's picture on my nightstand. Sometimes I talk to her about my day, about the book I'm reading, about the friends I've made.
I think she'd be proud of the man I've become, the man who learned to protect himself, the man who discovered that love without respect isn't really love at all. I learned that sometimes the most loving thing you can do is say no. Sometimes the best way to love someone is to let them learn how to live without you. Last week, I received another letter from Doris. The envelope sat on my kitchen counter for 3 days before I opened it. Inside was a simple card. Dad, we're sorry. Can we talk? Doris. I read those 8 words several times. I thought about the old me who would have called immediately, who would have invited them over for dinner, who would have helped them find a new house and co-signed their loan and fallen back into the same patterns. Then I thought about the man I am now, the man who has boundaries, the man who values himself enough to protect his own well-being, the man who learned that enabling bad behavior isn't love, it's fear. I folded the card and put it in my desk drawer.
Not as a keepsake, but as a reminder. A reminder of the family I used to have and the man I used to be. Both of them are gone now, and I'm okay with that. Sometimes the answer to, "Can we talk?" is silence. Sometimes the most powerful response is no response at all. Sometimes the best way to love someone is to let them figure out how to live without you. The card sits in that drawer, unopened, unanswered, and that's exactly where it belongs.